Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth United Kingdom. Joining me this evening, surprisingly, is Mark Sargent. How are you doing, Mark?
I am doing well, Nathan. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad at all. I was hoping to have yourself and Tim Osman on, although we're having so many technical issues. We've spent literally about the last hour trying to get Tim on with a similar issue to the one we had before, just a 403 error code with all the browsers he used. So unfortunately, he'll keep trying. We may be joined by Tim Osman of Infinite Plane Society this
Sure.
evening. If not, we'll have him on tomorrow and we'll try this again with him and possibly not Mark, maybe, we'll see. But in the meantime, we've got the subject of Freemasonry, and do the Freemasons actually know the earth is flat? And Mark is definitely the man when it comes to this subject. So we've been chatting about this for about the last 3/4 of an hour, haven't we, Mark? So maybe carry on with the conversation we've been having anyway.
Yeah. The Freemasons, well, I'm not going to give spoilers out right away, even though we've got 45, 50 minutes, because I imagine Patricia will start her show, because I got to jump from this to the hot potato show right afterwards. But the short version is, at the highest levels, I believe, and of course my opinion, and we'll get into the tracing boards in a second, I believe that the Masons, sure, they know. But you got to remember that the amount of people at that point, you're talking about air that is so rare that you might as well be, I don't think the ground troops on any of the major organizations that are tied to conspiracies, no. So, the lesser lieutenants of the Illuminati, or the Bilderbergs, or the Rothschilds, or the Council for Foreign Relations, or the Trilateral Commission, all the people, the underlings of these groups, I don't think knew anything of it. So, but the higher ups, sure, because remember, this is the one conspiracy where less is more, meaning you don't, sort of like NASA. The comparisons are very similar there, where 99.999% of NASA doesn't know anything. They're just wrench turners and people that run computers and install things and load fuel and all this other crap. The only people that have to know, I mean, would be a very small number, the guys that control the telemetry, and then of course people like Werner von Braun. So when it comes to the Masons, at the lowest levels, and I can say this, yes, everyone knows by now, yes, there are Masons in my family, both grandfathers and their fathers' fathers, and so on and so on. But my own father and none of my uncles were Masons. I never became a Mason, although I did research it quite a bit because I was intrigued, because my grandfathers were into it. So I did, I read all the books. I bought several copies of Morals and Dogma, the what I call the private Masonic Bible that is passed around. It was written by Albert Pike back in the 1800s. Albert Pike's a whole nother guy we'll talk about in a little bit. And so I did a ton of research. Plus, by the time I interviewed the guy for Strange World, the Mason is like, yeah, I know more about Masonry and the rituals than a lot of the guys that are in it, because the reasons you get into Masonry really vary from person to person, because at the lowest levels, and you and I were talking about this, at the very lowest level of Masonry, it's a social club. Like anything, you're going there to it's an excuse to get away from the wife and the family, go get drunk at a building with no windows, because most of the Mason buildings have windows so that people can't look in and see what you're doing. And that's basically it. It's a social club, more than anything. Now, are there rituals involved? Yes, there are. There's initiates, there's a number of degrees. The most common degrees everyone knows is 1 through 32, and you have to go through a ritual on every one of the frickin' degrees, and you got to swear an oath to secrecy. That's the big thing. The Masons, if you want the common theme about Masonry, which is why all astronauts were required to be Masons, at least from the Apollo program side, is that they swear they swear to secrecy, and the oaths are horrible and terrible. It's like, oh yeah, they're not really telling you that much. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to be an 8th degree, and you swear that everything you've learned up until now is a secret. Otherwise, we're going to disembowel you and put you on a pike and then burn you alive. And there's different versions of this at every degree. It's almost like the different versions of how we're going to kill you, even though I've never heard of such a story of Masons punishing their own for telling the secrets. I never actually heard of an incident where it happens, but that's what it is. Every degree is you have to swear these levels of secrecy. And you also, by the way, a lot of people don't know, you have to pay money between each degree. This is not a free thing. You've got to pay money, and that money.
Did not know that. So of course it's not going to be a free thing. It's a club.
Yeah, it's a club, and you have to buy it's kind of like the early version of pay to win a gaming scenario now, which is you have to buy your degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you get higher, 20 to 21, that's costs a lot more than 2 to 3. But to the point where, and I don't know because they have to adjust for inflation. By the time you get up to your 32nd degree, you're paying a big chunk of change. You're paying a lot of money for that. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The Masons, when you get up to those levels, when you get up into the mid levels, then it changes from a social club to business context, which is it's like anything, like any group that you're in. It's like, oh, what do you do? I do tractor stuff. Oh, what do you do? I do wheat stuff. Fine. We're both Masons. I'm going to give you a tractor contract. Hey, that's great. I'm going to give you a wheat contract. And everybody shakes hands, and it's great. And you make more intimate business contacts because you're both in the same club, which is fine. That also happens in different groups. What are you going to talk about when you're there? You're drinking. You're going to talk about what you do, and it's like, oh, maybe I can throw you some business. Oh, hey, maybe I can throw you some business. Then when you get up to higher and higher levels, like with anything else, you start feeling like you can influence more than just business. You start influencing business policies and commerce policies, and maybe geopolitical climate policies. And that's what your goals start changing by the time you get up to there. So when you're up in 32nd degree, you're talking people that are heads of industry and politicians and high-ranking officials of different groups. Because just because you're a Mason doesn't mean you can't belong to other groups. In fact, it's quite common that when you get that high, you belong to more than one thing.
When you say one thing, with me like Skull and Bones and things like that.
Oh yeah. There's nobody says that you can't be part of a different group that once you're in there. And again, I'm not trying to make this sound like a recruiting thing because look, I'm not. Clubs, when they start influencing policy, can be very bad. Did he finally show up?
Looks like it. We've just been joined by.
Holy smokes! Look at that.
How you doing, Tim? Can you hear us?
Yeah. No funny echoes or anything like that.
Nope.
It sounds perfect.
Okay, good. Sorry about that.
I'll turn you up.
I had to get proper clearance from my handlers, and it took a minute, but I got it.
Nice. So anyway, by the time and we'll let him chime in once I'm almost done with this part. What a lot of people don't know is once you make it to 32, then you can't go any higher basically without invitation. You have to be shoulder tapped to go to a 33, and you're not even really supposed to even ask to be a 33. You're not supposed to poke around. Oh, hey, can it be a 33? They should pretty much know by then if you're going to make it. And I've known people that have gone decades and decades, never ever were shoulder tapped. In fact, if you're going to be shoulder tapped, it's probably going to be early on. So that's basically the short version of when you get up there.
We were talking just before Tim joined, or before we went live, about some of the drama and the rituals, and Tim has detailed, it's my lead in for you, Tim, about the getting naked and march downstairs with a sack over your head and all that kind of stuff. Can you detail a bit of that for us now?
Oh yeah, well that was the Golden Dawn offshoot. It's a quasi-Masonic order. It's based on the Egyptian mystery schools. It was more overtly occult than Freemasonry, which is based on the symbols and the tools of the cathedral builders, which they use allegorically to describe spiritual evolution. So they show you like a rough stone, and that's you as an initiate. And then they show you a polished brick fit to be laid up in the temple of King Solomon's, or the foundation of the temple. But you have to be perfected. You have to be squared off and polished and made all nice and fitting. And so that's the idea of masonry, is it makes good men better. And it's basically Freemasonry, the tools of building, is about building your character, building your spiritual self, that kind of thing. So it's an allegory. But With the Golden Dawn offshoot, it was straight up Egyptian Babylonian mystery school based on the teachings of, well, Aleister Crowley consolidated a lot of this stuff. And so it's not the same thing, but the initiations were the same. The symbolism was a little more overt with the Abbey of Thelema, whereas with Freemasonry, it's a little less threatening, a little more Judaized. You might look at Freemasonry as being, like, as far as the imagery, the litany, it's very Old Testament. Whereas Freemason, the Thelemic organizations of the New Age, it's more overtly about, they're worshiping the sun god Horus. They have a big eye of Horus on the wall. Whereas in Masonry, it's not going to be overt and say we're worshiping a sun god. It's very covert. And so I went from, and this is what I was explaining in my channel, I went from the more occult side of things to the more mainstream Masonic. And I was able to see how one is actually hidden in the other. There's always an esoteric side. And as Mark was saying, not everyone gets the full story. And I happen to believe that you could make it all the way up to the top through any organization like this. And Freemasonry is just one example. And not know the deep, dark secrets if you're not someone that they find that they can use. And I believe at the top, it's all mutual blackmail.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I'll say it because I've done it in other shows, which was my grandfather made it to be a 32nd when back in the 50s. Was never shoulder tapped to be a 33rd, and I understood that later. That it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't. They didn't think they could use him for whatever, who knows? Maybe he was a straight shooter, maybe he wasn't, or maybe he wasn't flexible enough that they could use him for something. And so I was like, all right, I get it. I understand. But that's the same way with just about any organization. When you get up that high, it's like, okay, you're going to play ball or you're not going to play ball.
I mean, one of the reasons I actually asked you to do this, Tim, was because of David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. And he contacted me and said, why didn't you cover his masonry? Because there's a lot of people in the flat earth arena that are, I don't know if scared is the right word to use, but apprehensive about having any association or even viewing your material simply because you're a Freemason. And a similar thing happened with Shaq. And I kind of roll my eyes at this stuff, but maybe you can put some minds at rest. Start by telling us how far up you got in it. Are you still a Freemason?
Yeah, I can explain all this. And one thing I wanted to do here is really demystify it. There's a lot of superstition among these, and the internet fuels paranoia. And if you start off with a certain assumption about something, you're going to be able to prove it to yourself. What the thinker thinks, the prover proves. And so if you start off with, let me study conspiracies and find out how the Masons are screwing everybody, you can find a lot of data to back that up. If you start off saying, let me find out how the Jews are screwing everybody, or Rome is screwing everybody, you can back it up. I had some friends once who were writers in Hollywood, and they said they couldn't get anywhere because the Scientologists controlled everything. And these friends were Jews. Then I have others saying that Jews control Hollywood. So there's a lot of inconsistency and bad or just plain ill logic. And so I think that Freemasonry gets a lot of scapegoating that it doesn't quite rightly deserve. It's not a monolith. It's not uniform everywhere. And it's just one facet of a bigger problem. It's not just Freemason. That's just one head of this beast.
Yeah. Sure, you've detailed it before, but I mean, you might as well go through them. You add Freemasonry to the Abrahamic faith, don't you?
Yeah, and here's the thing: is that when I got into Blue Lodge, it's the first 3 degrees. I went in as an atheist. I lied on my paper because to get in, you have to believe in a higher power.
Yeah, I believe in something.
And at that time, I wasn't even admitting that. I was just like, we're just meat, It didn't really. I didn't think of it as really. I wasn't really overtly like into it for the spiritual thing. I was just more about the information. I was very atheistic. I didn't believe in any sort of divinity. I had this notion of, a soul and everything. But beyond that, I thought that human beings were pretty much screwed and not everybody was even, not that everyone didn't have a soul, but I thought that most people were dead at the soul level. And so when I went in, I had a completely different intention. I just wanted to learn stuff. It wasn't like I was swearing oaths to serve an organization. And so I went into my Blue Lodge. That doesn't take very long. It just takes 3 or 4 months. And then the Scottish Rite these days, that's the degrees from 4 through 32. In most places, they break it up over a weekend or 2 weekends, and they do it once a year. It's like an annual thing because it takes so many people to put it together. It's like a play. You know, these initiation rites, it requires a big cast, it requires directors, it requires tons of money, time, energy. You got to house everybody. And so when I did it, it was done over the course of a weekend or 2 weekends, I believe. And so I did go through the up to the 32nd, and then I was offered to enter into the shrine. But at that point, I was kind of tired of the whole thing, tired of the clique, big generation gap, didn't seem very productive. Seemed like a lot of just didn't seem like, well, not something I wanted to be a part of. And I learned what I wanted to learn. And interestingly, it wasn't from the initiations. It wasn't from the lodge meetings. Everything good I got out of it came in the form of a collection of books from an older Masonic friend who died, and he left a lot of books behind. And so I had access to the library, and I got my hands on a lot of Rosicrucian and alchemical stuff. And I was looking through it, and I found that much of what I studied from Aleister Crowley was plagiarized right out of the deep recesses of what the Masons know and what the Rosicrucians know, which is a lot of it's about what we would call sex magic. But what I'm saying is that this stuff isn't taught opening the lodges. You're not going to find the deep stuff. You have to look. But it's a good conduit to meet people who are a part of other organizations that kind of coincide. So, for example, if I had not gone through that, I would not have met Rosicrucians. I would not have met certain Templars. But as to the Shriner, that's only open to the 32nd degree. And in some places, they're trying to lower that restriction, much to the chagrin of the Scottish Rite, because they want everyone to have to go through their system. But I didn't do it because it's all based on the Abrahamic faiths. Blue Lodge Mason, you're praying to Jehovah. Go Rose Cross, or rather Arch Mason, Royal Arch, it's Christian. You go Shriner, the shrine is the shrine of Allah. I was like, I'm not going to go bow the same God in different ways. I was kind of over it. I've never been a worshiper of this Abrahamic faith thing. I've always thought of it as like religion is a mind parasite or mind cancer. So, and Freemasonry is a religion. Anyone who says it's not, it's a religion. It's a secular humanistic religion. Absolutely.
While we've got Mark here still, you had a few drawings and pictorial references to.
Oh yeah. Let me throw these out here. I'd like Tim's take on them anyway, because I've been staring at these things for a while. And are you guys going to keep going after I bug out? Just so you know.
We'll see how it goes.
Okay. So when I was digging into this, because I'd been looking into the whole aspect of Masonry for at least a few years before I got into the whole flat Earth thing. And so I got into something late, which was the 5 Masonic tracing boards. And if you guys want to look these up, I've got them actually printed out in front of me here. But when I got into them, the more I stared at them, the more I thought, because the question of what you wanted to frame this show with, which was, did the Masons know, or do they know about the flat Earth? And again, 99.9% of Masons don't know jack about anything. Remember, I don't think even the highest elite of any group knew about flat Earth, because they were looking for it for 30 years, with Admiral Byrd, and didn't find anything, and they were just about to give up, and then they find it. It's like, oh, okay, well, it turns out it was, it's Murphy's Law. So the 5 tracing boards, and I'm going to try to do this with one hand and hold my microphone at the same time, which is really interesting, because, and I printed them out and laminated them for you here. They laid out for me, and again, because only my opinion, and you guys anyone out in the chat room could shoot this down if you want, but from a game standpoint or a scenario standpoint, if you don't want to call this a simulation, fine. If you want to call this an absolute physical reality, that's totally fine. But it was really interesting, because as I was looking at them, they spoke, and I'll talk about them in just quick sentences. So here's tracing board 1 right here, and you guys can look this up. You don't have to. I know the reflection's probably going to be horrible, but it's, for me, this was the quick,
a little higher.
This was the quick start guide of the world. The gaming board, below, the checkered, chessboard down below, the 3 pillars that held up the sky, the sun and the stars.
You're gonna have to pull it back just a little bit, if you could.
Like that.
Going. There you go.
Okay,
Maybe.
perfect. The ladder that goes, to the sky, the ultimate goal, of course, the cross and the anchor and the heart. I'm still trying to figure out the rough stone and the polished stone down below. The quick start guide. What you're going to be getting into when you get here. Okay. So, and you guys can look this up. This is not secret information. All you have to do is type in Masonic tracing board in any search engine, hit images, and you'll get various versions of this. Okay. Here we go. Second one, second tracing board. The entrance, how you get in here. And it reads kind of like an amusement park ride. You have what I call an unlimited dimension outside. You see the two spheres up above. One shows a sphere Earth, and the other shows a sphere solar system. The guy at the bottom of the stairs taking your ticket. And then there's a second guy when you finally get into the door, which is much like an amusement park. Remember the Bill Hicks amusement park ride reference, where you go to any amusement park, you're going to have one guy that takes your ticket and the other guy that puts you on the roller coaster, and you see the checkered board up above, which kind of leads, that came from the first one. All right, so and you see the big G at the top, and that varies from drawing to drawing. Okay, there's three more. Third one, what I call the game over screen. You have the board down below, the checkered board in the center, some Hebrew writing and when I translated it, it kind of laid itself out kind of like the old school game over screens. You know, the skull and bones. Okay,
on a bit, Mark, just because there's so much reflection on it. Just back up a bit, back up. There we go. Stop. Perfect.
Okay. Again, you can look this up. It's the one with the coffin, and I know the laminate's kind of screwing it up, but I didn't want to wreck these things. I keep these with me. And this was kind of like the game over. So if you die in this world, that's it. This represents the mortality side of it. All right.
That's fascinating.
And then fourth one, this one's kind of lengthwise. This one was my favorite of them, which was the exit. And you can actually see, and a woman waits for you outside.
A bit higher.
Okay. No, that's all right. A woman waits for you outside the exit. And when you look back, that's the building where you came from, which is, again, what I had always envisioned, which it doesn't necessarily, I mean, yeah, there might be a dome structure on the inside, but I think ultimately the structure that houses the dome inside it, I think, is square, because machines do not like thinking in circles. Only human beings think in circles. Try to ask a machine to draw a circle, and it's going to draw a whole bunch of really tiny squares, hence pixels. Everything's in squares when it comes to computers and machines. So and then at where the woman is in the world outside of this, the unlimited universe. Anyway, my interpretation, the all-seeing eye up above. So that's your exit. And then finally, the last one, you guys can look up. There's different versions of this, just tracing boards, 1 through 5. And then the last one, which I will still hold on to this till the day I die. This one, the last one, when I saw this is what kind of got me. This is something that hadn't even existed 15 years ago. It's called, at least
back up a bit.
It's called,
there you go.
In our world, it's called an achievement screen, because all these banners are basically thumbnails for achievements. What you've done here, what did you accomplish while you were here in this game? This is basically your recap. It's like, oh, I did this. Were you a good person? Were you a bad person? And all the different aspects of it. And the achievement screen didn't even exist, in our world until very, very recently. So for me, the Masons, I don't think even the highest level Masons knew, more like kind of like nobody knew what was going on in Antarctica, because until the internal combustion engine is developed, what do you really know? You're the king of France in 1600. You have a map that shows what this world really looks like. Until you have the internal combustion engine, you can't explore it anyway. So until you have the tech to actually even decipher something like this, I don't think you I mean, yeah, you can understand on different levels and talk about it in terms of spirituality and growth, but I still think it has a physical aspect to it. And so that's why I laminated these 5 boards, and I stare at them, I don't know, not all the time, but quite often, and say, okay, what is there anything else in here that I can decipher? So that's what I got out of it. I think the Masons none of the ground troops know anything. And
I was going to say, can you back that up, Mr.
I agree. No, they're just like with any religion, you have an esoteric and an exoteric, and there's always going to be the masses who can't see what it actually is, and they might take it too literally. So, for example, like he was saying, there might be an actual physical meaning to this stuff. There might be something that you don't have the technology yet to translate it into reality, but it may contain very important truths. And so in that
Yeah.
way,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, efficiency. What's that line from Contact, where the old guy on the plane was talking to Jodie Foster, and he goes, any technology that's that advanced is going to have efficiency functioning on multiple levels. Which for me, it's like I think that these images were hidden not just in the religion of Masonry, but hidden in time. Meaning that you couldn't even, like a dream, you couldn't even figure out until years and years later, aspects of this that was not physically possible to even decipher until recently.
well, like, are you familiar with sacred geometry?
I'm sorry, say what?
Are you familiar with sacred geometry?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, because there's a lot of this sacred geometry encoded into the cathedrals. So there's a lot of secrets regarding mathematics and its connotations. It's pretty much it is a very philosophical and spiritual organization in terms of this allegorical use of building, the tools of building. But in earlier incarnations, the same system has been used with shipbuilding. Using shipbuilding, you could probably start a Masonic order yourself using the tools and nomenclature of video game design to explain these same concepts. To me, it's just like it's a system. Like, I don't think Freemasonry is some big bad bugaboo. It's like a union. And like any union or any organization, it has its own traditions, its cultures, its symbols. But I think it takes way too much heat from the conspiracy people who think that, if you're a Mason, like covertly, you're somehow working against them. And I think that's just pure superstition.
And you're right. And it's the only one, not to defend Masonry necessarily, but it's the reason why they catch a lot of flack is because it's the only one that's really in the public eye as more than any of the others. Nobody knows nobody in the Illuminati is going to announce themselves. The Rothschilds don't have a television show. Or the Bilderbergs or any of the other groups. You don't see the others advertise. In fact, the Masons don't necessarily advertise that, which is why their membership, you were talking about a generational gap. Yeah, they really have been having a hard time. I remember, quick little story, this was back 20 years ago. When I was sitting in a movie theater, I used to go and I always get there early to get my eyes adjusted because I really loved enjoying movies. And this was back before they had video trailers. It was usually just slideshows that would play on screen. And I woke up, I opened my eyes, and there was actually a Masonic recruiting slide that was on the screen. I was going, wait a minute, they are not allowed to recruit. But it wasn't a straight up recruiting. The question, it was like, who are the Masons? We are congressmen, astronauts, blah, 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 all this stuff. Not saying that you should join, like the Uncle Sam, we want you. It was more of just trying to put the intrigue in the air. But the point was they shot themselves in the foot, because a secret society where you're really focusing on the secrets means that eventually once the world got to a point where there were more and more distractions, the enrollment started plummeting to where now you probably know. I mean, their membership is really, really suffering because they're not allowed to recruit, and everyone's doing their own thing. And so it's not high on anybody's list is to join some sort of club along those lines.
I had this conversation with many of them, and one in particular was suggesting that he said, hey, look, you need to get your friends in here and take this thing over because we're all dying.
Yep.
And the numbers aren't there. And at the time, it seemed like a good idea, but I was just like, to me, this is an antiquated organization. Real social interaction and evolution of thoughts and ideas is going to happen here online, face to face. We don't need to do it in secret. We don't need to hide from any authorities. This is not what we're discussing now may have been something that would have been discussed in a lodge 20 years ago or something, but I think it's antiquated.
Yeah, the parallels we could even tie that into the Flat Earth Society, because the media recently has been scrambling around trying to contact people. And, the first thing, well, let's contact people from the Flat Earth Society. I did that radio thing in that Boston place, and they actually had said, they asked me, well, Mark's part of the Flat Earth Society. I go, no, not only am I not part of it, really nobody is. Eric's got his own thing with the IFRS thing, but no, you don't have to be part of a society anymore, because now we've got multiple clouds. I mean, everyone can just do their own thing on YouTube, and it's very loose organization. The rigid traditional paradigm that used to be required isn't anymore. And I don't feel bad for the Masons. Like, look, you you reap what you sow. You decide to make everything such a strict secret that you've secreted yourself out of existence almost at this point.
Well, earlier I brought up Aleister Crowley, and he was actually brought up on, some Mason named, I think his name was Theodore Royce or something, confronted him and said, "Hey, you published a lot of our stuff in your books," because Crowley was publishing stuff like crazy, because he believed we were in a new age and it was time to take all the secrets and make them public and let people make of it what they would. And according to rumor or legend, they made Crowley become a Mason at that point so they could swear him to secrecy to stop him from publishing future secrets. So these oaths are really nothing more than NDAs. It's a non-disclosure agreement. And any group of criminals can form an agreement among one another. And it doesn't have to be a part of like the Masons or this group. And so that's one of the points of my channel, is to kind of demystify this thing and get people out of the idea that you're going to find an enemy, because it has so many facets. And every group has its own bugaboo. I was on a live talk last night and people were saying, "Why don't you denounce the Jews? Why don't you denounce the Illuminati trannies?" And it's like, I'm not going to go through the list and check off all your, the reptilians and the royalties. It's just like, let's just focus on the facts. The world's flat and it's motionless, and let's go from there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Sorry, Mark, I just want to bring this up just because I discussed it in passing on a chat feed with Eric DeBay earlier, and he was saying essentially that exactly that. Once you take the oath, it's an oath for life. You're essentially contracted with them forever. And he was saying this as a besmirch against you, of course, Tim Osman, because you've been a Freemason, therefore you've taken oaths, have you not?
Yeah, well, I also took oaths to the other group as well. And the thing about these oaths, these NDAs, it's like you work for a company, you sign something you're not going to disclose. But when you're no longer with the company, are you really beholden to that? Like, I don't see the oath as binding. The only way it would bind me is if I was actually scared of them. And what am I scared of? There is nothing that they do that hasn't been made already public on the internet.
Yeah.
So
right, you've described them as being I don't know, should I paraphrase this? I'm just going to say it. So you said there were pervy old men behind a curtain. Are they going to come and slit my throat? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, that's what I said. Because here's the thing, like, if you're in a gang, or a mafia, and you betray it, yes, something's going to happen. But that's not going to happen with this organization. There's no, they're not involved in some enterprise where, I mean, really, no, I wouldn't say that at all. I think it's been exaggerated. There was some case 100 years ago where some Masons drowned a guy for publishing their secrets. Captain Morgan was his name, I guess. And the perpetrators got off, and it created this big anti-Masonic hysteria. And a lot of it's hysteria. Like in the 80s, it was satanic panic. And right now we're having the Illuminati New World Order tranny panic. It evolves.
Yeah.
It used to be reptilians. Now it's constantly changing. And so when Eric says that I'm still loyal to the Masons, he's speaking out of ignorance. I mean, you can leave your religion. If you're a Mormon, you swear oaths to become a member of the Inner Temple, the endowment oaths. Those are Masonic. And I know a lot of people who've left the Mormon church. You go to Scientology, you sign NDAs. I promise not to reveal Xenu. And then you leave, you talk to the tabloids or whatever. There's no penalty. It's all fear-based mind control. We shouldn't be afraid of these things.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. What I try to tell people, because since I've been doing this, I've had several people who have asked me to go after different groups. Matt said, "Oh yeah, you really got to work in anti-Jesuit stuff into your interviews." It's like, dude, come on. And
that's exactly what Eric said. He said, he doesn't focus on the Jesuit problem. Jew.
Well, here's my umbrella argument that I'll throw at anybody out there that's listening. It's kind of two-pronged, which is, one, out of all the groups we've been mentioning so far, right? You could lay them out on the table, and we've all seen the charts. Take the Jesuits, a Jewish cabal, the Illuminati, the Trilateral, CFR, Rothschilds, Bilderberg. Take your pick. Just any of them. You just write them all down in a line. Tell me who is higher than who. And you've asked 100 people, they're going to give you 100 different answers because everyone's got their own take on it. My point is this. I focus, because you know me, I focus on flat earth, and that's all I do. That I eat, breathe, sleep it. And for me, if this place, if it is flat or if closed, not enclosed, either way, I believe that we are part, it was constructed and we are part of it, in here, which means that they are bigger than anything else that's going on in here. I can almost guarantee you that whoever built this place, whatever it is, if it's advanced technology, if it's divine, let's not split hairs right now. If they don't care about the Illuminati, they're not going to care about the Bilderbergs or the Rothschilds, the CFR, or any of this other stuff. And if they don't care about a petty Jewish cabal, then I don't care about a Jewish cabal. I don't. So if you think for a second that whatever group you want to go after, they're not bigger than this. Until somebody can show me something that's bigger than the world being hidden, it's not that I don't care. It's just on a second tier now. If flat Earth for me is now the top shelf at the bar. Everything else, it's like, yeah, it's just second shelf. It's third shelf.
I agree. I've said this to a few people. I'm like, hey, if we took your pet group out, your bad guy, everyone has their little us versus them when they're brainwashed. Let's take your them and incinerate them all. They're all gone. The status quo is not going to change. And there is no them we could take out that's going to make that difference. So it's bigger than that. And that's been my point all along as well. It's like,
I'll even throw one more, and this isn't necessarily controversial, but I'm not going to use my Eskimo reference, even though I think it's pretty good, which is, if I gave whoever it is listening right now, I was a genie and I gave you 10 wishes. Would you use one of those wishes to wipe out one of what you just called a pet group? Let's say you're going to wipe out all Jewish people, right? Are you really going to use one of those wishes to wipe out, just erase them from existence, right? Is that where it's going to stop? Because it's a slippery slope. But one of the biggest reasons why I don't attack any demographic is it never, ever stops. Once that group's gone, you're going to focus on another group. And once you're just going to keep working your way down. And before you know it, you're going into a realm which is very, very dark and very, very lonely.
I'm going to steal your thunder, Tim, and say that you would describe it as the heads of the Hydra. But before we get into that, because I know Mark's on a limited time and there's a couple of subjects that I'm really hoping we can get in while I've got both of you here. Maybe I'll only get one of them. I don't know. It depends on Mark's time. So we've got Dome Wars. But before we get to that, if we get to that, let's talk about the town meeting, because it was done in Mark Sargent's name, which I think was
oh yes,
as I've got you both.
And by the way, I did not know when I made my video. I put it out there. Literally, Bob from Glowbusters says, "You know who that is, right?" And I go, "No, I have no idea who that is." So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I talked about this when I first planned it. I said we need to start getting this into the public record, and so I went to the meeting saying, we might be giving billions of dollars to Hollywood just to brainwash us. We need to look into this. It's malfeasance. So that was the case I was making. But from a marketing perspective, I realized that I don't have a brand or an identity. And so I was going to go in there with either Eric Dubé's name or yours, because you have the biggest or most cohesive bodies of work on the subject. And so we kind of hashed it over in the live chat. And the problem people had with Eric Dubé is they said, it's too... it's not narrow enough in its focus. 1 minute, it's good information all around, dinosaur hoaxes, every other type of hoax you can imagine. But we wanted the Reader's Digest version for the first time searcher on flat Earth. So somebody sees it in the paper, some Mark Sargent came to City Hall and said some crazy stuff. Let's search Mark Sargent and look what they're going to find. Flat Earth clues. I thought that's a better introduction than anyone else's message. So to me, it was a strategic thing to advance the flat Earth meme.
Thanks. Yeah, no, and I was sincere. I wasn't saying that sarcastically when I got to the end. I said thank you, because honestly, well, I've been enough things where people are not going to, they're going to say, well, that's not Mark. But it's great. I thought it was fantastic what you did, and didn't even hesitate to put it up. It was great, and I did not find it right away. It was sent to me.
This is funny. Before you go, a few years ago, I put out a book on marketing.
Yeah,
and it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And in the book, and I just remembered this today, I had these at the back. It was 23 guerrilla marketing tactics, and one of them was having an open door policy and having your name and your number out there. And I remember that's really how you got reached, wasn't it? By someone reaching out to you because you made yourself so available.
Yeah.
And that was actually a tactic in a book I put on marketing a couple of years ago. I thought that was a kind of a nice strategy that you employed there. Or
the strategy initially was just because I didn't know how big it was going to get. So I thought, if anyone, again, I was hoping more or less, I was hoping someone would challenge me and win. It's like, okay, did I screw up in this? Did I do something wrong? Is it absolutely not flat and I made a blatant error? Somebody please get a hold of me. And of course, but I still haven't taken down, the number still works and the email still works and I can't get through everything, but it worked to my benefit and the community's benefit, which was nice.
And some people said, why are you doing that? He's a domer. And I'm like, at this point, I'm not really too worried about that anymore. At first I was like, we really need to make sure that nobody's going to just rush to a conclusion and put dogma ahead of evidence. But the fact is, nobody's taking any one researcher's information and then making all their decisions based on that. People are just going all around and they're formulating their own conclusions. So I'm saying we're better off just all aligning as it's flat. Let's go from there instead of trying to, and people have accused me of trying to fracture this thing, and I'm not. I'm just trying to get the information out.
What, more fractured than it's already become?
Right, exactly.
There's so many flags flying right now, and it's interesting because as people's channels get bigger, their flags get bigger and more defined. And again, the dome thing, for anyone listening, I will not lose. If there's no dome, I won't cry a single tear. I just go with the dome thing because it seemed more logical to me and more of the stuff fit into it to me. That, and of course the atmosphere problem, because if you have an infinite plane, you still got to deal with that. But yeah, we won't get into that right now.
Yeah, it's all conjecture. But for me, it was more of just making the point that let's not make any assumptions and limit our thinking. Because more land fundamentally changes the dynamic between us and whoever's behind this thing here in this region. But anyway, it's like that's nothing to divide on. That's something to talk about.
Yeah. I hate to say this, but we'll just call it the infighting. The infighting in the flat earth community works to our benefit, I think, more than it hurts us, because it generates so much enthusiasm. And it's like again, rival teams that are rival camps. So you want to call it a giant Roman army with different factions in it. And the great thing is, if we have whatever it is, 15, 20 different flags. I don't know how many there are, but on the other side, there's only one flag. And so we all have our eyes over there and just waiting for them to come at us. We're just sparring, really. I mean, as soon as somebody comes at us from an organized, if science ever comes at us in an organized fashion, all this will go away. We'll come at them with everything we got. And until then, it's just human nature. Opinion.
Exactly. And I do think it breathes life into the movement. It shows that there's a pulse here, and it's better than silence. I think it's great.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it gets taken a little too far, but no permanent damage has been done. As far as I can tell, it's literally, I've treated, you probably heard me say this, it's really like the bored Roman armies sitting outside of the city. Don't know what to do. There's going to be guys that are scrapping. Because why not? You got to do something to pass the time and hone your skills, and that's what we've been doing.
Well, there's possibly people who have been watching this going, "Can't, I hope they have a full-blown row about the dome," which isn't what it's about, as both of you have pretty much said. But I know, Mark, you've got to shoot off shortly. Was there anything that you wanted to directly ask Mark while we've got him here, Tim?
Let's see. Anything I wanted to directly ask Mark? This is funny, actually. I get a lot of people in chat. They're like, ask him if he's a Mason, as if it would matter. And my answer is this: does it really matter? Like, we're going on the information. I mean, does it really matter? And my point here is, like, does it matter? It doesn't. I don't believe.
No, it doesn't. But for the record, and you guys can look this up. I mean, the internet, there's lots of stuff out there. Not a Mason. Did I actually consider joining the Masons back in the day? But it was more because it was an intriguing group at the time. But the reason I didn't was something you touched on, which was I watch a lot of movies. I absorb a lot of media. And for me, the ritual process of it, I'm sorry, it was just so dated. And it was just bad dinner theater for me. I read through enough of those scripts. You know the books that have been, guys that got out and said, okay, here's exactly what happens when a new initiate comes. It's like, holy crap, we got to go through that song and dance. Every initiate that comes in, like, oh, just.
Well, I have one question.
Yeah,
we should ask. Do you believe in global warming?
You wrote me about that once, didn't you?
I think I did. Yes. Do you?
I think you did. I do. But I look at it as a side effect, and I've said this on certain things. I look at it as a side effect of what we've done in an enclosed system. So when I look at global warming, I see it as, okay, we're in a structure and mankind has a technology now to where we can actually mess with the weather. And I think that there's some automated processes of this world, whether it's the jet stream or the underwater conveyor or whatever it is, that is trying to compensate for it. Like you bringing a propane lantern into your car and cranking it up, right? Eventually, and you've got your car running, eventually your air conditioning system is going to try to compensate for that lantern. And it's going to do some weird things. That's what, in my opinion anyway, that's what I think might be happening here. I think we've done some things, not necessarily, maybe some of it's public because all the internal combustion engines everywhere, maybe from something the military has done, but I do believe in it. Now, I noticed that you said global warming instead of climate change, because I know that's what the media is trying to lean towards now. Whatever's happening now, there's a lot of weird weather going on, but yeah, I believe in it.
Okay, sure. So that was my question, and here's why. And this isn't a knock on that. I understand your reasoning. It makes logical sense if everything else you've discussed makes sense.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is that if people wanted to go nuts about, are we secretly working for this? Are we this or that? What is more problematic is, are you voting for big government to solve that problem? Because the big environmentalist lobby is a very anti-human, misanthropic, collectivist organization moving us towards world socialism. And so that would be more problematic than even if you were Grand Poobah of your local Masonic lodge.
Oh, good one. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bigger issue, and as far as them solving it, no, of course they're not going to solve. I've heard some of your stuff. Name something that we've done right as a human collective over the last couple hundred years. We've always made the wrong choice for what seems to be the greater good, but it's mostly for greed and selfish interests. Just the bottom line of whatever corporation. But everyone knows this already. So yeah.
Okay. Well, no, that's fair enough. Fair enough. It doesn't change the fact that the world's flat. We don't have a picture of it. We want to know why the ISS has bubbles in space and everything else. And that's the bottom line. I don't really care particularly about people's political opinions either, because this transcends all of it. That's what makes it so intriguing.
Until something bigger comes along, and I still think there's something bigger coming. I really do. I think that flat Earth is just the framework for what's going to be inside the picture. But the framework had to change, because otherwise, like anything, you got to put it in context. So the flat Earth is the context, putting it in that, putting a border around it. It's like, okay, now what? I'm just waiting to wake up one day and people, my emails exploded. It's like, have you seen it? Have you seen it? It's like, what is it? So that's what I'm waiting for.
And I'd love to get into fake alien invasions and all those good subjects, but I know you've got to shoot off, Mark.
I gotta run. I gotta go. Patricia, hey, nice meeting you, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for allowing me to use your name. I won't be sending you a bill. That one's on the house.
No, that's really great. I was flattered, and at the same time, it's like, wow, this is really, really cool. And I loved some of the comments that people put in there. I'm trying to figure out what movie references, because they're going, well, we're all Mark Sargent. Go, wait, what movie?
Oh,
is
that's
that?
Fight Club, right? We're all Mark Sargent.
Is that Fight Club?
Yeah, that's Fight Club.
His name is Robert Paulson.
Oh, is that we're all Robert Paulson?
Yep. I'm gonna get on a shirt. We're all Mark Sargent.
Oh my God. Oh, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, guys, thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you. Do I call you Tim?
Yeah, Tim's good enough.
Okay. I'll go. Thank you, Tim, very much, and I will talk to you guys later.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much to Mark Sargent for being on Flat Earth UK once again. I'm hoping we're going to be joined shortly, if it's okay by you, Tim, by Martin Liedtke. He's got a few questions. He said he's feeling very clever today, but I'm sure he's got a few Masonic related questions, if you're okay to hang around just for a bit longer.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on today. I actually didn't know Mark was going to be on, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was helping me. He's sort of my go-to tech guy for the obvious reasons. You know?
See, I got Convexus on my end, helping me on my end, and yeah, so he was the one feeding me this. Try this browser, try that. It was like, well, we got it. So, and who's coming on? Marty Lead?
Not Marty Leeds, no. Martin, he was flat Earth British, but yeah, he's a good guy. He's like my cohort, fellow Brit who talks a lot about flat Earth. He knows a lot about maps mostly. Well, I say mostly. He knows a lot about everything. Martin's one of the smartest people I know. He's just he gets verbal diarrhea. I'm sure you won't mind me saying that, but I've said to him, you know, at least let Tim get a word in edgeways when you've got a question for him. So hopefully he won't be like what's the word, shy of the mute button. So but he'll hopefully join us any minute now. But while we're waiting, there was one thing that I did want to ask, and it may frustrate you that I'm asking this, but you know as well as I that even though you've detailed all of the Masonic stuff and said, look, I'm not a Mason anymore, I'm not beholden to any contracts, there'll be a certain type of person out there that'll just go, yeah, he would say that. Now I know it's kind of almost facetious for me to ask that kind of question, but how could you dispel the myths of those people who are just paranoid?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, this is what I've been talking about when people have this misconception about it. Like, think about the Inquisition, this idea of like, you know, is she a witch? Well, we don't find any evidence. So, well, let's look beneath the clothes and see if she has any moles. Maybe that'll explain it. You know, it's just they're going to keep looking until they find something. There are some people who are dead set on a specific conclusion, and they're not going to stop till they get there. And so I'm like, well, I'm not here to impress those people. I'm not here to please anybody. I'm here to push the information. The Earth's flat. That's the number one thing. If we make this about the people who are disseminating the information, it makes it a very toxic environment to speak openly. And I think it leads people to think that consensus is more important than truth. And this is not about consensus or agreement. It's about the facts.
I mean, I totally agree with you. But on the other hand, there are the sort of, is it the 5 stages of loss? And along that path, you have the fighting, the violent opposition stage where people will just brace against it, only to later realize it as being obvious and apparent the entire time. So shouldn't we have a bit of empathy for the people that are at that stage?
Well, some of them, yes, I guess so. But at the same time, I'm just saying is that it's a question of their focus. Should they be focusing on my background or the information that comes out of me? And people should be focused on the information is my take on it. And so I would like to divert attention away from anything other than the info when it comes to anyone, even Eric Dubay. I mean, I get people telling me, you know, he secretly works for this or this is, and I'm like, well, I don't know. For all I know, he's in an apartment somewhere. But it's the information I care about. Like, I've only watched Eric Dubay's videos because I like the content. Everything else is just, you know, sideshow. Some of it's entertaining, but I don't think it's all that important. And I like to hear when people are more interested in the bigger picture. And that's what Mark really conveys. He's not being milquetoast and not taking sides. I think he's taking the smarter approach of what's really going to matter when the curtain drops on this thing. And I think that's the smart approach.
Yeah, right. David Weiss has got a similar attitude when it comes to Eric Dubay. Obviously, we've talked about this off air, and you know, the idea, the notion that he may be a CIA paid infiltrator, heaven forbid. You know, David Weiss's attitude is, well, if he is, give me another 20 the same. You know, because the quality of the information is all that really matters. In other words, yeah. Who cares what he's like personally?
No, exactly. I like that. See, I get a lot of my best research from people who have conclusions I wildly disagree with. And that's what I look at it as, these are my researchers. I don't have to pay them. They're digging for information. They're getting, like, I don't agree at all with Russian Vid's rush to the dome conclusion, but I like his videos because he's topical and he brings out a ton of information that's useful, relevant to my interests, and then I can filter out what I need. So even if I am a crypto Jew Illuminati agent sent to, I don't know, turn flat earth into an atheist movement so we can become the army of the Antichrist, like if that's my goal, it doesn't matter. Just focus on what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with Russian Vids is that he's thinking outside of the box with a lot of the concepts he comes up with. And he even said this, I think it was last night on Patricia's interview with him, that he will see a dozen truthers doing a dozen different exposés on things. He might even get to the forefront. He might be the first with the story, but if he's not looking at angles that other people aren't looking at, it sort of ceases being interesting. He's just regurgitating the same old stuff. So he'll often come at things at a crazy angle. And I say crazy because sometimes I will watch his videos 50% of the time, and I've admitted this in his comments, so I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying this. Patricia said something similar, which is that you'll go there for entertainment value, because sometimes, and it may be that he's absolutely spot on, but sometimes the truth seems laughable. It seems almost ridiculous, and flat earth sort of encompasses that in a way, because you put it to somebody, a modern day Western, a heliocentric indoctrinated person, you put the notion to them that it's flat, and they do. You said at the town council meeting that they were sniggering while you were talking.
Yep, exactly. Well, half were snickering. Some of them had their jaws just wide open. But I guess what my focus here is I'm hoping people can kind of demystify this idea that, like, if you're a Jew by birth, you're guilty and you're going to do evil. If you're a Mason by loyalty, you're going to do evil. Like, this idea of impugning entire groups of people, that's how the elite control us. It's all divide and conquer. And I'm saying, if you step out of it and you look at people as individuals and you judge them by their own actions, I think you'll arrive at the truth faster. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. And it was really clear last night on that live chat. I was having people saying, why aren't you denouncing this group or that group? And I'm like, I'm denouncing all of you. Let's just focus on the flat plane and move from there. But a lot of people, they like to hold on to their explanations that have everything included. Here's the bad guy, here's the good guy, here's where you stand, here's how you win.
But there is certain things that can be demystified or even anthropomorphized, which is to say that evil, in my humble opinion, maybe you'll agree with me, we'll see, is just the acts of men. There is no boogeyman, there is no devil. And when people describe evil, they try and, I don't know what the word is, it might be anthropomorphized again, because it's making the devil, that evil, into a human entity, but it's an extraction of the person. It's not the actual individual that they're talking about. Yes, they're talking about a man, Lucifer or the devil or Baphomet or whatever they give it a name of, but it's not. It's just men. So therefore, it's a tricky one to explain when people will extrapolate the word evil out into this third party. Maybe you can demystify that. I know you did it on the last show in terms of saying the devil isn't real, which I see as obvious anyway, but evil is a concept for a lot of people. It's not just the act of individuals.
Yeah, we were talking about before how an institution can be bereft of empathy, like the DMV. The way it's structured, it's designed to be efficient in a certain way, but it's very cold to human needs. Like, if you don't have all your paperwork in order, or if you miss when they call your number, you have to go wait in line again. There's no room for spontaneity or leeway. It's just pure, cold, mechanical. And I think that the evil structures of this world, whether it be totalitarianism or religious fundamentalism, they're inherently structures that bring out the evil. It's a very, and by evil, I mean, it empowers one group to say they're higher than another. And what I've been saying all along is that religions are created for the elite to deify themselves above the slave class. Well, fundamentalists take that religion, the same programming, and even though they aren't actually elite or anything, they assume that they have the right knowledge and the other people are going to hell. I've been told by so many people that I'm going to hell all over the place on YouTube. And it's like, I'm coming up here to talk about flat earth, and I have people telling me that my soul's going to be incinerated forever because I didn't think the right thoughts. And I'm like, where does this come from? I mean, at some point, it seems to me that religion is something of a virus that infects the mind. It's like a zombie virus. It really does, because it reduces people into us versus them. And I think that us versus them thinking does kind of satisfy people's needs to have all of the evil in the world contained in some object. And that to me, I think, is just a way of putting order into your life. For some people, they can sleep better at night knowing, okay, the Jews do it all, so just stay away from them and keep your eyes on them and I'll be safe. And a lot of people fall into that camp. And just for saying that, those people are going to say, oh, he's a Jew or something like that. That's how they operate.
Well, Eric Dubay has said that. He said that you're not looking at the Jesuits. I mean, presumably, I can't remember. I watched so much content on Flat Earth, but I'm pretty sure you've talked about the Jesuits at some stage.
Yes, well, I have. In fact, I talk about the Jesuits incessantly, and so does he. But the difference is, I talk about the Jesuits as an extension of the Roman Church because it was essentially their uh, militant order, and he looks at the Jesuits as Jews, who because the crypto Jews who were founding members of the Jesuits or whatever. So he thinks it was like the Jews infiltrated the church. No, the Jesuits were created by the church as a direct consequence of the Reformation, and it was for them to retain power in the coming scientific age. And that's why they created heliocentrism. So what I'm saying is that let's not blame the Jews. Let's blame all the mind control systems, both religious and secular, all of them. Put them all in one group and isolate it and recognize that, including the globe, heliocentrism, that has to go. But what Eric would have you do is let's excise this group, marginalize them, eliminate them, and the rest of us will be fine. And no, that leaves the rest of the beast intact. We got to take out not just chop off one or two heads. I'm saying, starve the beast, starve it to death, let it die. And that's been my message. And that's not Mark's message explicitly, but it is implicit. It's implicit that you stop feeding the divide and conquer games, you stop feeding this beast system that lets them control us, and eventually it'll starve off and we can move on. And I see a lot of people falling prey to this hate this group, hate that group, and I'm a little sick of it, but I'm fine dealing with it. I'll tell them, hey, Earth's flat, let's go from there.
I mean, the heads are clear and obvious now. You detail, but the body is government. I'm correct in saying that, am I not?
Yeah. World government, globalism, or this structure of increasingly, because it's all parasitic by nature. It's not going to be confined to one area. So yeah, I would say we'll just call it we can call it government because this is an anti-statist movement. We'll call it big state.
Okay, and parasitic is a word I would associate with psychopathy, most definitely, and that's something that perhaps when we spoke last we didn't get into a great deal. You mentioned, when I listened to it back, I noticed you'd said it as well, so you're obviously familiar with Thomas Sheridan's work. Is psychopathy, again, I think I gave you a recommendation in one of your channel. You said if there's any channels you would recommend, and I recommended H.G. Tudor's channel, which is called Knowing the Narcissist. Relatively new, although he's written a lot of books, but new to YouTube, reading out some of his books and maybe in 10-minute sections. I doubt you've had a chance to look, but to keep it more general towards you, what do you know about psychopathy? It's a pet favorite of mine in terms of subject matters. So if you can tell us what you know about that, I'd be really, really grateful.
Yeah, no, I was definitely studying Thomas Sheridan. And then there's another guy, Sam, I think his name's Sam Vinkin, I believe his name is.
Yeah,
and then there's
Sam
Vaknin. Yeah, he wrote Malignant Narcissism. And that's an important book to read because
just gonna have to correct you, because if he ever listens to that, I'm sure he'd be outraged.
Yeah, actually, I know he would.
Malignant self-love, narcissism revisited. There you go.
Yeah, Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Great book. I read it a long time ago, but he talks about it a lot. You can find his videos. But if you want to understand how people who are empathy impaired act, you study the narcissist. It's the best example textbook, not the ones who are running around killing people, but the ones who blend in just fine and live that way. But it's difficult until you've learned how to identify them. So you study Thomas Sheridan, you learn how psychopaths act and how they function, and then you can recognize psychopathy in people because it's invisible. And it's not relegated to one specific race or one group or one IQ range. It's wide ranging. It's it's like a broken personality. They have some severely impaired abilities to relate to other people, very empathy impaired. And there are certain patterns that are characteristic of all narcissists. They behave in certain predictable ways. And Sam and others have actually broken this down in books to where people can read it and suddenly they look back and they say, wow, this person was a narcissist. Here was a codependent. This person was probably a full-blown psychopath. And you're like, it takes the blinders off. And then after studying this for so long, I started paying more attention to, and I came to the conclusion that the God of the Bible, and as well as Allah, all the monotheistic faiths, their gods, the king of the gods, big sky god, is a narcissist. It is a narcissistic construct. And so I've extended that to, if these religions are being made to anthropomorphize government, it makes sense that we could relate to government as it is, as a narcissistic construct. And that's And if you study narcissism, you see that in order to relate to it, you have to relate to it in a certain way. You're a codependent, meaning you're a citizen or you're a subject, that's the king. You're the serf, that's the lord, master, slave. There's a dynamic there that the state institutes, and it's all based on this psychological construct used to put us into a state of submissiveness. So we're the ones paying taxes, we're the ones obeying their regulations. It's all about control, and narcissists are control freaks.
Yeah, the system has been set up in such a specific way that it benefits narcissistic behavior, and therefore it means you can use a really good analogy of cream. You know, the narcissists being the cream, they rise to the top. So you say it's spread out, but if you go into the city, you know, positions of power, banking, things of that nature, you're going to find a greater degree of psychopaths in those types of jobs because they emanate towards those types of jobs. Excuse me. But again, there's different levels of psychopaths. This is something that's got really well detailed by H.G. Tudor, because you would imagine, by the way we're generalizing psychopaths, although we've split it off from the knife-wielding maniacs, who are absolutely psychopaths also, and splintered it into the people who just blend into the background. But they also would be split into lots of different levels: lower level, you know, mid-level, and high level. Narcissists is the way that H.G. Tudor categorizes them, and they all have different traits. There's the cerebral, and you know, there's I'm not going to list them here. It's
yeah, like cerebral and somatic would be the two main ones, though. Like cerebral's the one, like they want to be appreciated for being a genius, even if they're not, but it's all about their mind, and they want to be like the dominant ego in the room. I'm the wizard of smart. And then you have the somatic ones, who are the seductress, the seductive ones, the druggies, the rock stars, the ones who feel like the world revolves around them and they ought to be worshipped. And those are the two types that are pretty much most easily distinguished: the cerebral and the somatic. But you know,
Yes.
one thing about it is that the state, yeah, it rewards the narcissist and the codependent. The people in the middle, the independent, are the ones it hates. That's why it hates upward mobility. That's why it hates free market. That's why it hates self-determination. They want you to be dependent on the state, a slave, which is codependency, or you can join the state, you can join the system, whether it's in the corporate world, military, or government, and serve as an extension of the narcissistic state, and you get rewarded that way. So you're either a good slave or a good ruler, but in the middle, you're just an enemy to be fleeced and taxed. And basically, they tax you if you're in the middle to pay for the ones at the top and the ones at the bottom. That's why all these revolutions, these collectivist revolutions, they're basically a war on the middle class.
This branches perhaps because you've mentioned tax into some religious aspects, because I think Jeremy was talking about this on Globebusters last week about the positive encouragement of the churches in terms of their tax relief that they get. In other words, it's encouraged to have a faith and have a belief and have a church. Certainly in the States, it's definitely beneficial. And going by the buildings and architecture throughout Europe, you know, it's definitely beneficial. But this leads back onto your paths that will lead back to one particular part of the world.
Right. Well, we're talking about Rome, right? I mean, ultimately, but I want to point out too that by saying all lead to Rome, or all roads lead to Rome, we're not saying all roads lead to Jesuits, or all roads lead to Catholics, or all roads lead to the Pope. We're just talking about where the body of this system lies or resides and where it originates from. And although we can trace it, because I'm saying that Christianity was a system for serfdom and it was rehashed as heliocentrism for the scientific age. What I'm saying is that even though we can trace it back to the foundation of Christianity and Roman polytheism before that, I like to point out that it goes further back, much further back. Definitely, it's an old Babylon thing. And so is the culture, which is why you have all these. I mean, their culture is psychopathic, as we were talking about. And that's why we see this case of like this, 508 cases of child rape by a church in Los Angeles that they settled for $66 million. I mean, you see this stuff and people are like, why is this happening? Well, that's their culture. And if you don't know it, you're not in it. And then on InfoWars today, there was this expose with, who was it? Who's the guy? Cernovich. Mike Cernovich was talking to Alex Jones today about how at the very top of these, basically in the corridors of power, you don't get high enough unless you're compromised, unless you're part of the establishment. It means you're initiated into what they do, and it's mutual blackmail. And they're saying that basically the reason why you have pedophiles at the top is that they're filtered up that way, and that if you're not willing to cross those lines and utterly betray humanity at that level, you're not welcome at the top. That you're just not. And so that's why I think, we point fingers at different groups. Well, it's everywhere, and it's not specifically subject to one group. And you can be a good Mason, you can be a good Catholic, you can be a good Muslim, you can be a good Scientologist. I mean, but you're in an institution that enables psychopathy.
So what's the solution then? So how do you attack the body of this beast?
I think it's a matter of shining a light, first of all, because I'm looking as a pattern, the Reformation, which was basically breaking up the knowledge monopolies. That's the main one. I mean, we're outgunned, we're outfunded, we're outmanned, we're outwitted. They've been doing this mind control thing for hundreds of years, thousands of years. This is continuity of mind control and deception. They're playing chess, we're playing checkers. So I'm saying if we can just expose the game, show how it works, have the biggest WikiLeaks dump of all time, show the real maps, that's how we fix this thing. There's not going to be an uprising. We're not going to drag out the guillotines. We're not going to have any leaders to decapitate, because they don't have leaders anymore. I think they learned their lesson. The French Revolution, these types of ideas of mobs rising up, yeah, that's a real threat. That's why they do things in secret. They don't want people to be able to detect them. But now, the royalty, the elite parasites, aren't walking around with crowns and scepters. It's all in the DL, and you can only see it through their secret handshakes and through their symbols, through their coded words. So we're able to detect who it is and how they operate, but we're not going to have a bloody revolution or anything like that. This is going to be a gradual, I think, unveiling as people just find out more and more.
But I mean, like we found out now, people have found out, and I can go by myself, I suppose. My reaction was to tell others. And only today I watched a video by Beyond the Imaginary Curve where he went out with, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but a billboard. And it said, "The earth is flat, Google it, YouTube it." And just film people's reactions as they walked past, which I thought, that's nice. Why not? It's the way advertising works at the most base level. Stick it out in front of people and watch their reaction. And that's pretty much what we're doing right here, right now. But if you're saying it's only going to sort of trickle out at a very slow rate, and you've said it yourself, that seems like it's co-opted or co-optable. What's the thing that gives people hope that it isn't? That's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, well, that's a concern I've had from the beginning. I'm like, well, what if from the beginning they're intentionally leaking it in order to effectively control, like a controlled demolition of an old paradigm, and that this is a controlled revelation of something else? And I was kind of wargaming this in my head. I'm thinking, well, if they're doing it, what would they lead us to that wouldn't change the status quo, that would keep them in power? And the only thing that would possibly do that would be an enclosed system. That's the only thing that doesn't change the status quo on a fundamental level. So
right.
I was like,
it's all about, you've said it, I'm just taking your words, it's open versus closed.
Yeah, see, I see, and I don't have a problem with this, but I see what we're on as a plantation, and that we're being kept ignorant about the nature of it. Others see this as a simulation, that's all there is, and this is our game board. And they might look at the architecture of it and say, something greater than me made it. And see, I'm not making that leap, whether it's Jehovah or game builders or some higher mind. I'm looking this as men behind curtains dressing up as Wizards of Oz created this illusion that's in our heads. And it's just men. And when I look at what men do, because if it was a creator doing it, yeah, maybe the creator would make this as a little womb to spiritually evolve us. But if it's men doing it, it's out of greed. It's because they want to enslave us. They want to take our children, take our money, suck our blood. And so I'm pretty sure it's men, wizards behind curtains.
Yeah, I'm certain it's just men. Definitely just men behind curtains. The grand illusion that we're given daily is a nonsense. I've got one up on screen right now. This spherical sphering earth is a complete farce, but it's just an illusion. You describe it as a mental construct, and I think that's pretty damn accurate. It's only a globe in your mind's eye. It's never a globe in your eye.
Exactly. The globe is absolutely a mental construct, and for that matter, at this point, so is the dome. And I'm the first to say, if I hit 80 degrees south parallel, whatever, and I start like running some sort of a barrier or a boundary or a force field, I'll be the first one to turn around and I'll change my web domain from Infinite Plane Society to Enclosed System Society or something. And by the same token, if there is more land and there is some new wave of exploration by a bunch of billionaire entrepreneurs who want to get away from big government, if that were to happen, like the Peter Thiels of the world, following through with what they've talked about before, which is breakaway civilizations, breaking away from centralized authority. If that happens, then Mark's going to change his website from enclosed world to not enclosed. See? So ultimately, it doesn't matter if we have disagreements on what this thing is. It's just a matter of exposing it first and then going from there.
I've still got a few things I do want to cover with you. One was about the shipping lanes. I'm going to maybe keep that in my back pocket. Hopefully Martin will actually join us. If so, we can discuss that topic a little bit further. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll just chance it. Let's just chance it and hope that Martin joins mid-conversation. So something I mentioned to you a while back was that even if we are in an ice ring or in a closed system, a dome, whatever, I don't think this, by the way, just for the audience's sake, I know you don't, but if it were, there's so much ocean to hide land in. It seems that there's land masses that appear and disappear on maps anyway. We've got the Hyperborean that appears on various different maps. Do you not think that it's a very strong chance that there's land actually hidden within what they show us as the globe, i.e. that exact land area?
Yeah, in fact, at one point, you go through denial. You go through these phases when you encounter flat Earth. Well, my first denial was, well, maybe it's not flat. Maybe it's just bigger than we've been told, and they're hiding more land masses. And then I kind of moved on from there. But I do remember bringing this up to friends a few times, saying, "Hey, do you think it's possible they're hiding land?" And I know a lot of globies who are perfectly comfortable talking about hidden land, but they're not comfortable about flat Earth. So I thought, well, that's kind of a way to edge into the discussion. If you can talk to your friends about hidden lands and explaining, well, they're hiding it in the flight patterns. It's not accounted for on the maps. The elitist, parasitic, enslaving scum who wrote our globes and write our histories just fudged with our maps. That's not a hard sell. I've convinced people of this. And that's not even breaching the subject of, is it stationary and flat? And so that fact alone, just extra land, changes the entire dynamic. If Antarctica were actually a continent full of resources, it would be fundamentally, it'd be a big shift in everything around the world right now today if they opened it up for exploration. But they're not going to do that. They're obviously guarding it. So yeah, what you're saying makes perfect sense. And you were the first one to bring this, you brought this up before. I was thinking, okay, am I being closed-minded about the infinite plane? Am I being dogmatic? So I started thinking, what would make sense if there was a dome and that would still make sense for the elite to want to hide it? And then you brought this up and I'm like, yeah, that would do it. Maybe there is more land underneath a dome or underneath an enclosed system. And that alone would still keep my worldview, not my worldview, but it would keep my assessment of the elite intact. They're hiding something. They're hoarding something.
Okay. One other topic which definitely didn't get covered last time was purely because you hadn't been to the town council meeting yet. Was it city council, I should say? But yeah, the term flat Earth, I think, has got a lot of impact, or the Earth is flat, whichever you prefer. But that terminology immediately gets people's attention. But you didn't use it. You deliberately used the Trojan horse method. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with flat Earth?
Yeah, I did. You're right. Yeah, exactly. The reason why I used a Trojan horse is the term flat Earth is a thought blocker. It throws up, like in 1984, he talks about it. It's called Crime Stop, where Big Brother programs you with all kinds of internal blinders, like a psychic sensor. And flat Earth cannot penetrate that psychic sensor the first time you hear it. It causes you to laugh. And I thought, well, if I go say flat Earth, I'm going to have 300 people behind me laughing. And when people are laughing at you in those numbers or screaming at you, when there's a mob, it kind of takes away from your message. They can't hear you. So I said, well, let me just do this, kind of sneak it in. First, contextualize it, malfeasance. We wouldn't give billions to Hollywood. Why are we going to give it to NASA, who are producing movies and for propaganda purposes, just like Hollywood? serving the same interests. But I laid the case that way, and then I pointed at basically a chink in the armor, maybe a little smoking gun. And that way, if they were to search bubbles in space, all of the videos that say bubbles in space somehow relate to flat Earth. And then if they go a step further and say, who is this Mark Sargent character talking about bubbles in space? Bam, they're right there into the heart of basic flat Earth ideas, specifically flat Earth clues.
It's also a little bit of a white flag as well, because you've used Mark Sargent to illustrate your point in the Dome Wars, and I think you'll agree you've kind of moved beyond that now. You've made your point, sort of thing, and it was nice today to see you sort of chit-chatting with Mark. Obviously, you've got different views, but the Earth being flat is a big enough paradigm shift for any normal human being to cope with. You know, once they get into the politics of dome or open space or whatever, they're kind of, how did you put it? They're not getting their information from one person, so it's kind of, who cares, so long as the issue is there, so that we're not all marching down one road towards dome. You know, that's kind of all that really matters. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And then I have people, I even see in the comments here, they're like, he's not talking about the evilness of the Jews enough. And I'm like, you know what? The reason I'm not is that there is enough room on the internet for a wide array of opinions, diversity of thought. And if you're not getting all your Jew phobia out right now, after this, just go watch one of those vids. You don't need to get everything from one source. Like, I don't need to prove myself to every compartment that I'm not their particular devil. I'm not their bad guy. That's not really my responsibility. And so, yeah, I think it's good to talk to Mark. And even though I made a lot of videos calling him a wolf in sheep's clothing or suggesting he might be, like, that's all just, you know, just the debate. But my point is that, yeah, we can have these debates, we can agree, we can fear each other, but once we've talked, we can kind of drop that stuff. And so, same thing with others. I've been actually making a lot of these older videos private where I've laid charges against people where they've come to talk to me about it and explain what they really mean. So I think we have to be open to allowing people to actually speak for themselves. And when people don't speak for themselves, when they avoid the discussion, that's when it gets a little shady. And that's why I called out Eric as a Jesuit, because he's acting conspicuously like one. But if he emails me and says, hey, man, I'm not a Jesuit, I'm just a guy on the internet. If he does that, and if he says, maybe you have a point, maybe I shouldn't only focus on the Jews, then I'll take down all my videos having to do with that topic.
No, that seems fairly reasonable. Although one would argue that why should he kowtow to you? Why should he do anything? But by the same token, I mean, complete agreement with you. That's why I challenged him today. You know, I completely agree with your point. Why wouldn't you look at it? Why wouldn't you at least assess it rather than standing firm? But I played devil's advocate last time, and I don't feel like I need to this time. You know, you made your point strongly enough, and Eric seems to be mingling down in the trenches at least a little bit. I had an opportunity today, as did a few other people, to chat to him in Dal's chat feed. So, you know, that's nice. And it's a few times he's done that. He's been on Dal's show. So he's making moves to humanize himself a little bit more, make himself a bit more of a man of the people. And that can only be applauded. And even if he is a member of these clubs, we've discussed it on this show, you know, does that mean he's been co-opted? Even if he has, like Death says, give me another 20 of them if they've got such fantastic information, because he's exposing a paradigm shift that essentially leads us down the correct path. I mean, I've forgotten the phrasing you used in terms of how we are as a collective. We're anti-government, or I forgot the term that you actually used.
Oh, yeah, I use the term anti-statist, which just makes it means, yeah.
That's it.
Moving towards individual liberty, individual, you know, sovereignty. The idea that we don't have to have a mediator. And one of the points I would make, though, is that it doesn't really matter anyway if he does turn out to be, let's say that what's his name is actually working for the Pope directly or something. It honestly doesn't make a difference, because the evidence, the videos, the content speaks for itself. You know, what's the video he did? Bone Wars is a good one. He has some interesting stuff on giants. I mean, it's very well researched. His videos are very listenable. So at this point, it's just like, I don't even care anymore. I'm probably going to take down the video calling him a Jesuit. You know, people can make up their own minds. And if he doesn't want to reach the same conclusions as me, that's fine. He can keep his final conclusion, or he can do whatever. It's not really up to me anyway to police anybody's thoughts. So I'm probably going to back off of that. If he doesn't want to respond, that's an answer in itself. It's sufficient answer for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to justify it in my own way by saying, like with Patricia Steere, you're just using the quote unquote flat earth celebrities to illustrate a point. And why not? You know, if the trolls will do it just to call them a CIA shill for the sake of it with absolutely no evidence, at least you're providing some logic. And at the end, once your point's been made, you've said, well, yeah, I'll take that video down. What's the point? It's potentially divisive and acting like the thought police. You know, I'm glad that you've said these things. It makes me very, very happy. I won't lie. But yeah,
I'm not here to divide. I'm not here to police anybody's thoughts, and I resent people policing my thoughts. And the internet's big enough for everyone to have their own conclusions. So let's stay fact oriented, and I think we'll be fine. And I am going to take down my "Is Eric Dubé a Jesuit?" because, and this is just for me. For me, it doesn't matter, but he fits the pattern, and it's just, I don't agree with his conclusions, and I don't think you should either, but if you want to, that's up to you. We'll figure it out eventually.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we're gonna accept. I've got a chat feed from Zoe Be Here and Love to say that Martin's been waylaid for about another 10 minutes. So unfortunately, Mark, you've missed your opportunity. Hopefully he'll get a chance to chat to you of his own accord at some stage. But it's been a real pleasure having you on again, Tim. Thank you very much for joining us once again on Flat Earth United Kingdom.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me on. It was nice talking to Mark and getting that clear. And also, by the way, I'm going to be talking with Bro Sanchez tomorrow. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. He just spoke with ODD, and I think that's being uploaded tomorrow. ODD Reality spoke with Bro Sanchez. I haven't watched it yet, but you need to watch that one. And then he's going to follow it up with talking with me tomorrow.
Cool. And if you want something to watch directly after this, Mark is going to be chatting with Patricia Steere on The Secret Show. And from me, Nathan Oakley, I'll just say like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you all in the next video.